Welcome to Trailer Rewind. Every month we go back and look at a film that Pete and Andy talked about in their trailer picks from the regular show. We watch it and have a very spoilery discussion about it. Today we're going to talk about Mr. Nobody, and this was Pete's pick from November 8th, 2013. We finally get to pick a Pete pick movie.
That's good. We're spreading it around.
Now, he said, I went back and listened, he said this strikes him as a bit of a Benjamin Button if it was taking place with a hearty dash of string theory to it. He and Andy both commented that it had a look like a bit of sliding doors to it. I don't know if you've seen Sliding Doors.
Yes.
Sort of that, here's a key point in somebody's life, and which way do things go if different options are chosen. But they mentioned that they liked how it looked very clever and how it was tracking the main character through multiple versions of his life.
Yep. I think that's pretty accurate, even if it was just from the trailer.
So, after watching this, my first reaction was, I think that you were going to love this movie. It was like it was like made for you. Am I right?
Yeah, well, yes. Definitely it's right in the sort of genre. I mean, if people listen to the Mindbender short, you can get a sense that this is the kind of movie that I really sort of take a big bite out of. I actually am really glad that we picked this one because I had rented it or borrowed it from my library probably about 6 months ago, and I had watched it with my wife, and to be honest, it didn't stick with me over the course of those 6 months. So it was really great to revisit it and take a look at it, and I think that kind of informs a lot of what I would talk about what makes this movie great and what kind of makes this movie dissipate in one's mind. I think that I really like it, and I really like where it's trying to go. I think in terms of story, it is left a little bit thin because it's really about concepts, and it's really about showing concepts in a really artful way, and that's really wonderful, and it does a wonderful job of that. But unfortunately, the story is very when you look at it objectively, you think that the story might be a little small, and it's more of a canvas for which to paint this sort of beautiful version of this concept. And while I like all that, I think when it holds up to my other favorite Mindbender type movies, it ends up coming in a little bit lesser than that, even though it's totally the genre that I geek out over all the time. So I think you were right to think that for me. Did it have the same sort of resonance for you?
It's interesting that you talk about story in this one because as I just watched it earlier this week, and it's been really, I've been turning it over in my head a lot because there's a lot in here. And actually, I came down on the side of, I felt like there was so much story in here. I agree that it looks like it might be not a lot if you tried to pick all the pieces together, but I feel like the way that it's structured, the editing, and just the rich use of a lot of cinematic conventions to give us editing to parallel things, I felt like this was like almost 2 films worth of story. There's just so much packed in there. Now, the amount of time or depth that we have with each of those stories or components is much shorter than I think that in a typical film, but I feel like the way that the stories weave together, the same locations, visual images, there's a resonance that I feel gives them more weight and gives you a little bit more, more heft to their presence in the story, where I can start to build out sort of the missing pieces or gaps in my mind of, I think this is probably how we got here. I know enough about these characters. I'm seeing some images that connect to other things I've seen that give me some little cues or hints as to how we got to that part of the story, or how in his life he's there, or why he's there, the choices he's made, the relationships he's in.
Right. And, that makes a lot of sense, that I should look at it in that way, too, to think about that there's so much story. But I think what I would add to that is that there are so many stories that are a part of this sort of major concept. For example, if we talk about each of the ones, and you mentioned depth, I think that might have been what I found lacking in this, in that you consider the three major turn or choices with each girl, each woman going through the story, and how little how little screen time is given to the story with Jean, right, as opposed to the other two, and maybe that's about what hangs out mostly in Nemo's mind when he's remembering the story later on. But I also think about that kind of diluted the idea of the sort of through line, the story that is what is about this string theory and everything that's going on for it. It seemed like each of those little stories there could have been so much more, two movies worth of stories here, but instead, because they were working on that major concept, that major through line, it ended up that we lacked depth in order to show this sort of beautiful concept, which again I like, but it left me feeling kind of flat.
Okay, so I guess to really talk about this, we need to talk about the structure, because we can't. This isn't a typical linear narrative. There's a lot more going on here. So I think in terms of, as we talk about story, we can talk about structure. But to step back, we've got a framing story, which is the story of Nemo Nobody, who is, I think, like 118 years old or something like that. He's the oldest person alive at that time, because in this future,
in 2092,
2092, technology has advanced to the point where they can basically, I believe, like regenerate their cells. So he's the last person alive that has not had this process. So he's really the last mortal. So we're getting from a person at the end of a very long life. An interviewer comes in to talk with him, and we get Nemo's memories, a reflection back on his life. And as with memory, it's not always linear. We may be remembering one thing, which then keys off a point to another tangential story. But the unique piece about this is we get his life, but 3 different versions of it. We see him married to 3 different women.
And it's even more than 3. It's kind of exponential beyond that, because there are different choices within each of the 3 female choice narratives.
Oh, yes.
That he is given sort of the Edge of Tomorrow style. I can go back and choose the left door and see how it turns out for me that way as well.
Yeah, that's true. So we have the 3 women that he has relationships with, but more than one story with each of them. So we've got multiple narrative through lines, and none of them are told in a sequential manner. We're jumping about within each story and then across, bridging from one to the other. Early on, his memories are very clearly blurred. We see that he's with, I think, with Elise, and they've got kids, but he's calling his kids by the wrong name, and those are the names of his kids from his marriage to Jean.
Right.
So what I appreciated in helping me track this was the use of color, because there's a strong color associated with each woman, which helps us early on, I noted, identify who we're with to sort of ground things. Anna is red, Elise is blue, and Jean is yellow, and those colors are always associated with them, even to the point of like the homes they're living in. The entire color palette is skewed toward each of those primary colors in those components of the story. And I keyed in on that early enough where I thought, oh, okay, they're giving me a lot of visual cues so I don't get disoriented, which I appreciated given the very fragmented structure that we move around throughout the film.
Yeah, and I saw an IMDb note that associated those colors with feelings as well, considering Anna's red to be love, Elisa's blue to be sadness or depression, and then Jean's yellow to be a symbol of greed, which I think is interesting too.
Oh, interesting. Okay, because that's not a color we typically, usually green, envy.
Yeah,
greed.
Okay, yellow and greed seems odd, but that's what they were calling out on IMDb.
Which makes sense, because when you look at his story that leads there, he's having a conversation with, or he's telling us, I'm going to live in this house and I'm going to have this kind of car, and he set these very specific goals, and he's going to work really hard for those things. So it's this very driven sort of consumerist lifestyle to have the big fancy house and the car and the pool and all of those things. So.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I could see that. One story, where one woman, we spend more time with Anna.
Yes.
Than any of the others.
Right. Definitely, Anna seems to be the focal point.
So that story, I guess we need to go back to sort of the crucial point in Nemo's life, where his parents split up. He's on the train, and he's got a choice of either staying with his father or going with his mother. And Anna's story follows him if he chooses to go with his mother.
Right.
And so she is in a relationship with with a man whose daughter is Anna. So as Nemo's mother and this man are having a relationship, he has feelings for Anna, who is basically his stepsister. But it's this very passionate relationship that they have as I think they're 15 years old at that point.
It's like Clueless, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's the dramatic version of Clueless.
It is.
Told in nonlinear futuristic.
In a nonlinear futuristic fashion. But we do see that Nemo has met all of these women when he's much younger, like 7 or 8. At the point of the parents' divorce, there's a scene he's riding his bicycle and all 3 of them are sitting on a bench, or at least he has a memory of this happening.
They all lived on Butterfly Street.
Yes. Which is another interesting point that you bring up is the butterfly, because that's a key point at the beginning of Nemo's stories. He's talking about how he ended up with the family that he ended up with at the beginning.
Which seems like a total aside when you look at the whole movie. I guess that's kind of where I get into, what is talking about this is the movie or this is the story of the movie.
Everything that you say is contradictory. You can't have been in one place and another at the same time.
You mean to say we have to make choices?
Of all those lives, which one is the right one?
Each of these lives is the right one. Every path is the right path. Everything could have been anything else, and it would have just as much meaning. Tennessee Williams. You're too young for that.
You can't be dead and still be here. You can't not exist.
You think about our talk about Comet or movies like this, and do we think, who is our point of reference? Who, as an audience member, who am I living? Am I third person watching the story as it happens? Am I experiencing this as Nemo? And in this movie, they change that quite a bit. And I don't know if that was a positive or a negative. I'm actually just thinking about it now for the first time, but that may have been what took me out of the sort of emotional connection with it, because Nemo seemed so detached, because that's the nature of his character. But that story with the angels, about how the angels made him literally kind of omniscient, right? That was the story that they gave us at the beginning.
Yes.
And then he's able to sort of review all options, all courses of life as he goes. It seems a little bit inconsistent. I don't know that I have a problem with it. I think it's done beautifully and it's done really creatively, but those are the kind of things that continually kind of pick me up, in that it doesn't seem to pick a lane and say, this is our story, this is what we're going for.
Well, I think that's the challenge of a film like this, that it expects a lot of the viewer.
Yeah.
To really, you have to be, this is not a movie you can really turn away from the screen for more than 15 seconds. There's so much visually going on. There's large stretches where it's, either Nemo's association. So there's early on, there's shots of like train tracks. There's lots of things with the pool and water and memories and visuals. It reminded me of, I could see a lot of like Terrence Malick in this, in terms of that nonlinear structure and a reliance on just powerful images to convey emotions or thoughts from the character, not so much through the dialogue. It's very much a show, limited telling type of story. So yeah, we do have multiple layers of narrative as well, because there's scenes early on where we're in outer space on some type of transport space station. I think we later learn that it's going to Mars. Much later in the film, we learn that this is a story that Nemo himself is writing as just a student, just writing a little novel or short story about Mars, because of a story he told to Elise.
Do you think so? Now that's where we start getting into sort of the mind bender and the spoilerish things about this movie. Is, do you think that he's writing that, or do you think that he's determining that based on his abilities as a 15-year-old, and so he's determining that future for himself? I mean, that's what the movie, like you say, it asks a lot of the audience, and I love that. And what I try to do, what I usually tend to fall on the side of is that yes, he wrote it, and yes, he also did it at some other reality in the course of this story.
And the thing is, we don't get enough of any section of the narrative to really give us, for lack of a better term, a valid context to say it is one or the other.
Right.
And to me, this was a film where I thought at the end, I'm going to have to watch this again to track not only the different narrative threads, to be able to connect the pieces of a scene. Oh, that's part of this thread. That's part of this thread. Now, the colors tell me, again, which woman he's associated with, but, which version of that story. And also to see the images, like the butterfly, there's the leaf, that flies across, comes back of what is the resonance of this. Because for me, it's a film that didn't give me all the answers to all those questions, but I don't feel disappointed or unsatisfied with that, because I think it just did it so well to give me enough, but not too much.
Right. And I really feel like this movie is, it's I guess it'd probably be stereotypical to call it an art house film, but it really is art. And the people who made this movie were really doing it in the way to make a spectacle with a story that is a spectacle, and for you to say, this is what I felt in watching this movie. And I think with that description in mind, I think it's going to be great for people who appreciate that when they go to movies. It didn't do particularly well. I don't know if you've seen the sort of the notes about it, but they shot it in 2007. It was released in most foreign countries, in 2009. And then they released it in the USA in 2013, and that's why you get Pete and Andy talking about it in 2013.
Yes.
In the opening weekend in the USA, it made what's reported on IMDb, and I don't think this can possibly be true, but $1,612 on 4 screens. So you think about it, like really thinking about it as an art film. They made the movie for a reason, but it had a huge budget, $47 million.
Wow.
In 2007, and it really didn't connect with people. And I didn't hear about it, but I did see it at the library, and now the reason why now we're talking about it because it's on Netflix now, and it's a great opportunity for people who appreciate this kind of film to go and see it, because I don't think there's any way anyone could have caught it when it was in the theaters.
Oh no, but this is one of those really, a really surprising film. I looked at this and just how well this film was crafted.
Oh yeah.
To say, how did this not find its audience earlier? And I guess it's, part of it comes down...
Which time?
Well, yeah, not getting to the States until 2013. There's plenty of films that, may struggle or not make it here for a while due to whatever distribution. Somebody's got to be willing to take a bet on this and say, yeah, I think there's an American audience that's interested in this, and it may have taken 6 or 7 years for them to finally get to that point, but that it hasn't. Because I think, again, this is a film that, for people that are looking for something that's really compelling, that's really high quality in just every aspect of the visual structure and vocabulary of this film, that it hasn't gotten a broader fan base. And maybe they're out there. But it's, again, something... It's
trending up, too. That's one thing to notice.
It's been on Netflix for a while, and I hope that it continues to find that audience. There's so many things that I found in this film that connected back to when I was in high school working at the video store. Because there was a line that Nemo says early on where he says, "Why am I me and not someone else?" And that triggered for me the movie Wings of Desire by Wim Wenders, where there's angels early on sort of wandering streets of Berlin, and they can hear people's thoughts and of young children. And this question was something that felt like, if not the exact question, was something that one of these angels overheard. And then the second thing that really connected back that I hadn't even anticipated, I hadn't thought of this film in years, is this director of Mr. Nobody, Jaco van Dormael, directed a film called Toto the Hero, which unfortunately you cannot find on DVD. anywhere, but it's the story of a young boy who is convinced that he and his neighbor were switched at birth in the hospital due to some nursing mistake. And so now his neighbor is living the life that he should have, which is this very well-to-do family.
Yeah.
And he himself is living with the family that the other boy should have had, which is, this struggling working class family. And the other thing that happens is he's in love with his sister, which couldn't possibly be. If it was his sister, he couldn't be in love with her like that. So clearly this is not his life. And it was something, it was the late 80s, early 90s. And when I saw that was a film that he had directed back then, I thought, I see similar themes of wishing for a life that's not yours. Is there some way of living that other life? But it really touched for me, these films, seeing them at that point, being 18, 19 years old, when you're really trying to determine your own identity and your place in the world. And those were two films that really I connected with. So this was really almost a throwback to that of, yes, I haven't had a film that spoke to me like this in a long time, of these questions of identity and life choices, and done in such an artfully constructed way.
Well, and that thing, the art of the film is just it's top notch. It's loaded with camera tricks throughout that are stunning. The kind of stuff that without intimate knowledge of how it could possibly be done, it seems like it's impossible, and it doesn't feel like it's done with any sort of really technology tricks. One of my favorite shots is early on. I think it's we've talked about it a little bit when Nemo is at Elise's house, and he gets up from bed, walks into the bathroom, looks at himself in the mirror, and then all of a sudden the full shot becomes the mirror. And mirrors are notoriously difficult to shoot with, because you see what's behind the curtain when the mirror's there. So how they did that, and then how they go in with the mirror being a focus of the shot originally, and then all of a sudden the mirror becoming the camera, is just it was just brilliant, and stuff like that. And then there was a shot where we see a train coming by, and then we eventually the motion control of the camera goes with the train, and then the train slows down and we come on the train. There was just a lot of stuff that seemed really seamless, and there was technology used to make those things work, but it's just the kind of stuff where when you appreciate the art and the spectacle of film, this movie is really going to stick out as something that they've really taken a lot of care with and done it in a really great way.
It's such a, I don't want to say manipulation, but it is, because of the way the camera is going to move us through a scene, to use tricks like that. Or in a lot of these memories when he's younger, looking at the depth of field, where it becomes a very shallow depth of field, because in a memory you'll remember that one thing. He'll remember his mother's face in such sharp detail, but everything else around out of focus, to really capture what memory is like. It's those little touches that there's such intentional, detail to this, that I was continually in awe of everything that I was being presented with, because it was done so well. And to balance it with, again, the editing, to put together these scenes with cuts back and forth, to be able for us to track through that, but to keep that, I guess, visual parallel that I talked about, of like the train tracks. There's this, one time we're following the tracks, and then I think we've got like a double or triple exposure of multiple train tracks, and the tracks splitting off in different ways and that's what we see. So we don't have any context of who's viewing this or what's going on, but it just feels so true and natural to what should be in this film.
Yep, I agree. And it was all, we talked about this in Demolition, but everything was took care to be metaphor, right?
Yes.
For the story in a very artful way. So when you appreciate those kind of things, this is definitely what this movie's going to do for you.
So we've got all these visuals carrying us through this film. And this is, I think, probably because of just name recognition. On most of the posters, you see, Jared Leto on there,
right.
Mr. Nobody. But he shares probably as much screen time with his 15-year-old version of himself, Toby Regbo. as
Yes.
these two as Nemo, nobody, carry the vast majority.
Yeah, I think it's
of
pretty
this
even.
film. Yeah, so it's to have that consistency of performance throughout across multiple storylines to keep us rooted in who this person is. I was just in awe of these two guys being able to carry through this film as two components of the same person at different points in his life.
Right.
I don't know what Toby's done since this, but after seeing this, it's been quite a while. Looking forward to seeing him do something else, because I thought there's such a connection that the audience has with the character of Nemo.
Well, he's currently on Rain. I don't know if you watched that show on the CW.
No, I don't. Okay.
Yeah, he's on Rain, and Rain is not a terrible show, but a lot of people would consider it somewhat of schlock TV. But he is great.
Okay.
And I my wife watches that pretty religiously.
Okay.
And there's good stuff there, but I think that's what he's currently doing. As far as films, I'm looking at his IMDb now because I'm not really familiar either. But the last really big thing he did, it looks like. Maybe Treasure Island. No, that's TV movie even. So this is
okay.
So not a whole lot. Oh, he was in Deathly Hallows Part 1.
Oh, okay.
He's young Albus Dumbledore. But
Oh, wow.
Uncredited.
Oh,
So, yeah. So interesting, but the fact that he's on Rain right now, he is still acting, and it definitely will have there will be more stuff coming out for sure for Toby.
so I mean, with those two really carrying this film for the bulk of it, the next relationship that we spend a lot of time with is with Anna.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really younger Anna, but we do have some scenes with older Anna, and that's Diane Kruger and then Juno Temple as young 15-year-old Anna. And the relationship between the younger versions, I felt there was we spent a lot of time. I think the most time was spent with them, so that relationship was really well defined. So to see the interactions later in life, because of the way they're separated. They bond together, and then they're separated. The parents split up, and Anna sends letters to Nemo. They have a pact to meet at this lighthouse. She's going to come and find him there someday. She sends letters, which Nemo's mother then tears up. So again, there's this tremendous loss that they both experience, and when they come together, it wasn't what I expected.
Which time? Because I'll say that I agree with you that most of the times it wasn't what I expected, but I thought it was totally fulfilling, or what? That's the wrong word. But I really liked their final coming back together when she appears in the circle that he's drawn.
Oh yes,
that I found totally fulfilling.
Yes,
and I was totally with them on that one. So the other times I was like, what the heck? But they got me for the last piece.
So to me, that's the relationship I think I enjoyed the most, maybe because we got the most time with them to really see how strongly they connected. For me, it's the relationship you're rooting for. But when you move into his next relationship with Elise, which, in my opinion, you can tell is going to be cursed from the start.
Right.
This girl is nothing but trouble. There's this older guy that she's in love with that doesn't love her, but she's always wants his attention. Nemo getting together with her. This is not going to end well. And then as they get married, she is just not a happy person. She's definitely got the blues.
She's a mess throughout.
She is a mess throughout. And this is where I always struggle with trying to track adult Nemo and what his career is.
Oh, yeah, it's super difficult in this movie to figure out which Nemo is which career.
Because we've got, we have a little bit. We've got pool care Nemo, who's got the long, scraggly hair. We've got that. And then we've got professional Nemo, who is like a host of some type of science show.
Right.
But I think there was another.
Like Bill Nye Nemo.
Yeah, the Bill Nye Nemo. But I don't know Bill Nye Nemo if that's after Anna or if that's during Elise. That's the one that I wanted to go back to see if there's something to clue me in as to, or if that's separate Nemo altogether, because he's commenting on the nature of relationship and time and space.
And that's where it sort of gets lost, because I also would like to go back now. That was my second viewing that I saw last night when I watched it. But I think when he starts off as Bill Nye Nemo, he's completely clean-faced. And then after we see the gas explosion with Elise in the car where Elise is gone, that he all of a sudden Bill Nye Nemo now has the burn scar.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm wondering, I mean, so you think about all that stuff, and I think that the film purposefully mixes those stories with his career to bring us to the final sort of resting place of the story when he is 2092 and laughing as time reverses. Because I think all of that stuff kind of blends in on purpose, which I like. The concept of what was Anna's theory about how things were going to end versus what really happens. I think it blurs, and I think that's one of the great things. You mentioned the Elise story. That was my favorite performance, actually, was the girl who played 15-year-old Elise.
Oh, okay.
I thought she was spectacular.
Yeah.
Probably just because I believed that she was literally insane. But no, I just think she carried it really well. And that's not to say that the other performances were bad. I just thought that stood out to me as really believable, and I really sort of bought into who she was as a character and what that young actress was doing.
Yeah, and then Sarah Polley playing the adult, sort of, chronic depression mom who's just overwhelmed by everything. Yeah, so we've got those two. And then, those were the relationships that I think we really see the most interaction with Nemo, his wife, his kids. Next, if we sort of work through his family, then we see a lot of time with Anna when he's with his mom, but then we also have the relationship with Elise is occurring when he's with his father.
Yes.
And it's clear that in that version, there's something that's happened to his father, and I don't know if I blinked and missed it, or because last we saw, Nemo's running on the train, if he doesn't, then he stays with his father, who's a weatherman. But now at this point, by the time Nemo's 15, his father's got some type of illness.
I don't think you missed it. I don't think there was sort of an incident that happened. I think it was a degenerative. I think. Well, I think the inference was that it was a degenerative condition,
right? Yes,
similar to something like Alzheimer's or MS or some sort of neurological thing, in which Nemo has to sort of not only navigate his own life but figure out how to help his dad through it as well.
Sort of, he's the caretaker for his father, at this point, and that's when Nemo says he's going to the dance and he's going to marry the girl that asks to dance with him, and that's where we get the Gene story.
Yeah, and that's the most determinist story of them all, right? So every step of Gene's story, Nemo pre-selects what he's going to do.
Yes.
He says that he's going to marry her before he goes to the dance, he's going to marry the first girl that dances with him.
Yes.
And then he makes the decision, I'm going to be rich, I'm going to have this house, I'm going to have a pool, I'm going to have all this stuff. And in every piece of that story, it's him making all of the choices and leaving nothing to fate.
It's an interesting sort of comment to think about the extent to which he's in control or has determined what his life is going to be in relation to the amount of happiness that he has in that relationship.
Ooh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
Because you think about, he's very deterministic with Gene. With Elise, he's clearly making a decision to stay with her in this relationship, because at several points you're like, okay, she needs help. You need to do something, and he doesn't. It's okay. I'm going to help you through this, and he's carrying a lot of this. He's carrying the family.
Yep.
And he's clearly made a decision to do that. With Anna, it's almost she's in their young relationship. It appears that she's the one that's in control, or is guiding that relationship a lot more. So to think about in terms of the amount of happiness he has in each of those relationships, with the amount of control that he's exerting. It's sort of an interesting concept.
What brings us happiness?
Right.
Is it our choices, or is it our acceptance of reality?
Right.
Ooh, I like it.
Okay.
Heavy stuff.
We can just end there. That's just just leave it right there.
Well, I also do want to talk about the music.
No, of course,
because that was really, really great. And I actually was a really big fan of the score. Every time that the music sort of, and I say chimed in, but when there was really subtle single note entrance type things, it reminded me of Donnie Darko, which I'm a huge fan of, but then also it reminded me of like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where it was just trying to remind you of the emotion, and it was done really well. And I'm not familiar with Pierre Van Dormael, who is the composer, but he's done. It looks like he also worked on the other things that you mentioned, which was Toto the Hero and stuff for Jacko. So I was really impressed. Really liked the score. The soundtrack, the songs chosen in the soundtrack were great too, but they because they were using it for that sort of, here are the parallel stories, this is the theme and stuff, and because they were songs, I got a little bit tired of them when we got to the end and we were using them over and over again. I was like, oh, here's the operatic piece, here's the, those kind of things. But all of the music I thought was really, really good, and I was happy with how it was used in the film.
Yeah, it's picking songs that everyone is familiar with, that you've heard a lot, to really capture the mood. The 15 something, Anna and Nemo that have been out on the porch, smoking marijuana. You've got the Pixies playing as they start, sort of,
right,
making out on the kitchen table. But then you've got, the younger Nemo, and you've got lots of songs from like the 50s that it reminds me of, when Marty goes back to the 50s and Back to the Future. You've got the idyllic, neighborhood with bright colors and happy music. But it just, they were familiar songs that seemed to key in on those emotional cues appropriately for me.
Yeah, I thought they did well with that
too. So again, it's just another layer of the artfulness of this film, of picking that right song to communicate that right emotion or state of mind of a character, to do that through these popular songs. Yep. So it's, we could probably just keep picking our way through this film for another hour because there's so many just touching points, but I think we've really covered the bulk of, I think, the key points that I wanted to talk about in terms of what I got out of this.
Yeah, me too.
To say it's definitely a film worth checking out on Netflix and viewing at least once, perhaps two, maybe even three times over the next several months, because I think it's something that I won't tire of. On multiple viewing. It's something that I look forward to coming back and is a true piece of art, finding something new in it each time that I see it.
I think that's totally accurate. And I think, the one warning that I would put on that is that I don't think this is a good movie to search for on Netflix if you really need a sort of spoon-fed story. If you don't want to do work as an audience member about your appreciation for it, if you feel like you need a really sort of a story that's set up and that's going to wrap up in the way that you want it to, this isn't necessarily the movie for you. But if you want to think about all the different possibilities that can be there, and if that kind of art really sort of opens up for you and it's expansive and that's the kind of movie you want to watch, then this is probably a good one to just kind of to find on when you have some extra time to look for something new and refreshing on Netflix.
It's something that you want to sit down and talk with someone about afterwards, because
like you and I are doing right
exactly, because I'm just thinking about the one scene that I really couldn't put my head around early on when Nemo's in Elise's house and he goes to the mailbox and there's an envelope that slides through the door and he opens up as a picture of him with Jean and the kids, and as he looks out the window he sees the mailman like walking backwards, like he's being rewound in time. What does that mean? I don't know. But I love the thought of being able to go back to this film and finding some way to attach some meaning to that.
And is that when he's dreaming, or when he's hypnotized, or when he's recalling his memories to the reporter? See, there's just so much you can go into on this movie. So if you find that work and not fun, then don't watch this movie. But if you want to see something beautiful and that will pull different parts of emotion out of you at different times, I think this could be a good one for you.
Okay. So usually as we start to wrap this up, we talk about where it ended up on our flick chart.
Yes.
So,
how about, did you do it already?
Oh yeah, I did it already. It ended up in an interesting spot. So
okay. Where are you?
So it ended up at number 42 out of 180.
Okay.
And it ended up...
That's high.
Oh well, I love this movie.
Yes.
There's so much about it. It ended up right below Fury.
Okay.
Brad Pitt, the tanks, World War II.
Yep.
And then it ended up just above a smaller film that I discovered on Netflix called Band of Robbers, which is a sort of modern retelling of Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn set in a contemporary era where Huck Finn is an ex-con and Tom Sawyer's a cop. It's definitely something worth checking out. It's, again, smaller little independent art film that is really refreshing.
Gotcha.
But it's, yeah, Mr. Nobody, number 42 out of 180.
So for me, mine ended up a little strange. Mine ended up lower, and I think for a couple of reasons. If you remember last time that we talked about Comet, and I think there are a lot of similarities between Comet and this. Yes. But Comet for me was story heavy, and those other things were sort of sprinkled in, the sort of beauty and those kind of things. So, and I tend to default to those, where Mr. Nobody wasn't as heavy story-wise and all the art was up there. So that's the number one thing why it's the other direction for me. The other thing is that you've heard Andy and Pete talk about their Oh Brother block.
Oh, yes.
On Flickchart. My current blocker, my current first film that everything comes up against is True Romance.
Oh.
So... And a lot of times unfairly things get pumped into the bottom things because I can't. I mean, True Romance is better than Mr. Nobody to me. So anyway, it ended up for me at 62 out of 112. And where it ended up is in between two next reel movies. So below Snowpiercer, which you may have heard
oh yeah,
Andy and Pete do, which I think is a great movie and everyone should see. And above Prometheus, which I liked more than the film board did. Yeah. So that's one thing about that. But the thing that I think is interesting about this range in my flick chart is that these movies are movies that I wouldn't necessarily select, but I would definitely recommend to people. Like other movies that are in here, like The Abyss and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's not a bad spot, even though it's in my bottom half.
So it's not your heavy rewatch favorites, but definitely solid films to recommend to someone if they haven't seen them before. Okay.
Yep. This is a good one for that.
Okay. Well, now that we've rewound, we're going to fast forward to what's coming up on the next reel.
Okay.
Pete and Andy have their TNR Vacation Challenge. They're going to be talking about Paranorman, which was a movie with stop motion animation.
I love Paranorman.
That's something that Andy challenged Pete to find, and that's what Pete picked. And that's one that I have not seen, but I
have to go see it.
That studio, they're
Laika.
I have not seen much of their work. It's stuff that I'm going to have to add to my list. And then Andy picked, I think it was dystopian comedy was his category. He picked Dr. Strangelove,
and I haven't seen that.
What?
So. Yeah,
what?
See?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Okay. I should have said what about Paranorman
exactly.
For you, yeah. So we have our own vacation challenge now.
I think we do. And that's awesome. So they've got that coming up. I'm working on wrapping up another trailer or another 3 of a Kind that I've got coming up. I talked about it at the film board. This is about creativity and focusing on the head, the heart, and the hands, and those tools in their use in the creative arts. So that's coming up in a week or so, as soon as I can get that wrapped up. So, Justin, it's been a while.
Yes.
It's nice to get a chance to talk with you.
We'll be back.
We'll be back. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Good night.